to our webinar, Building Your Credibility and Influence in Your Family Business, hosted by the Family Business Network North America. We're glad you guys could be with us today. I'd like to introduce Jennifer Muntz, who's our content coordinator for FBN North America, who's going to be joining me on this call. Welcome, Jennifer.
Thank you.
We have a great session today, and we're going to have some participation and some engagement throughout the program, and Jennifer is going to walk you through some of those details.
Sure. So this format is designed to be highly interactive. We want you to join in the discussion. So anytime you have something to share, we want you to share it with us. And we'll be going through a series of slides, content slides, and then there will be times where we ask you guys questions and hope that you will unmute your line and have a conversation and a dialogue with us. So that's going to be the format. We will be doing introductions here shortly, but before we begin, Andrew is going to go over the FBN code.
One of the things before we start this session we want to just re-emphasize is one of our principles with FBN North America is clearly the confidentiality, trust and openness, and open participation. So we create a non-solicitation environment, so we want to encourage you guys to keep the conversations that happen on this webinar confidential. We will not be posting this webinar or sharing this webinar with participants who are not here or members who are not here. So this conversation is only for this webinar, and you don't have to worry about us sharing stories without any permission. So please keep these conversations confidential, respect each other, and we will move from there.
Great. And so before we begin, I'm going to briefly go over the control panel. So on the right-hand side of your screen, you should see an orange button with a white arrow. This allows you to minimize and maximize the control panel. On the control panel, you'll see an area, a microphone that's probably green. If you can go ahead and click on that, it'll say muted. So you'll be muted on your end. And so why don't you take a minute now and go ahead and do that, and also check your microphone to be sure that we can hear you. You can see that that test right there under audio. And so while we're doing that, Ryan is going to go ahead and unmute everybody from his line, from his control panel, and that way, when you guys want to participate. So Ryan, the only other thing is that we're unable to see the attendee names. So we are going to need some help from you as we go through here. So if you advance the slide, there is the introduction slide. So
actually, before we get to the introduction slide, we just wanted to highlight an upcoming event, which is Breaking is our upcoming Family Business Network event in Coral Gables, Florida. And the thing we want to highlight is that the 13th and 14th will be a Next Gen only day. So we hope you guys can join us for that Next Gen only day, and if you can join us for the whole conference, that would be great. You can find details for that on our website at fbn-na.org. So next slide.
Now we're going to do introductions. Sorry about that. So we're going to ask each of you to introduce yourselves, stating your name, family business, share something about yourself, and then a story of how you influence a situation or how somebody has influenced you. And so I'll go ahead and do my introduction first, and then Andrew will, and then we'll just go down the list here. So my name is Jennifer Muntz. I grew up in an entrepreneurial business-owning family who's no longer in business together. Something personal or professional about myself. I've been working with FBN for a little over 2 years, and I'm really excited about the organization and the path that we're on. And a story about how someone has influenced me. Well, I was at a crossroads in my career trying to determine what my next step was, and I confided in somebody that I trusted, somebody very close to me, and said, I have these ideas about starting a consulting firm. And so I found just an enormous amount of support, and they asked me some very hard, tough questions and really allowed me to find my path and be true to who I am. And so I'm grateful for that person who had a major influence in my life. And so, Andrew?
So I inherited my ownership in my family business at 22 when my father passed away fairly suddenly. And so I'm a third-generation owner in my family business. Something personal or professional, I guess personally, I am now in the process of getting my father's cousins to make some decisions on the last sale of some property that we own as a family. So then how somebody has influenced me, I'm going to talk a little bit about one of my mentors who influenced me when I didn't have a whole lot of belief in my own credibility. I had a mentor who influenced me by confronting me and just saying, you are credible, you just don't want to see it in yourself. So that was a way he influenced me.
Great. Thanks, Andrew. So now we're going to open it up and see if Audrey could unmute her line and do her introduction. We hear something clicking, so
can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Great.
Okay, good. Hi everyone, I'm Audrey Darley. My family's business is W.S. Darley and Company. I'm a fourth-generation member working in the business. I guess something about me professionally is prior to coming to the company, I worked for 4 years at a commercial bank to fulfill our family requirements, work outside the business before joining. And recently, in a decision that I influenced was the decision to implement a Salesforce CRM program. And that's just something that the G4 has been passionate about, and we went through it. It's kind of our first thing first project that we went through in a professional manner with a proposal and being responsible for the implementation.
Cool.
Thanks, Audrey. How about Brian? Can unmute your line.
Okay, can you hear me?
We can.
Yep. Hello?
Yep.
Okay. So I'm Brian Wall. I work, my family's business is a wall clipper corporation. So yeah, I'm the fourth generation family member currently working in the business. In terms of something personal or professional about myself, I guess I have been through the NGLI, the Next Generation Leadership Institute. I think that was a big self-exploration opportunity for myself, and I learned a lot about who I am and the type of leader I want to be. And I guess that sort of ties into how I've been influenced, which, I would say my father has been a great influence on me over the years. I've just seen how he's always, put our employees first, and really, family is one of our company's values, and it's not only, family in terms of family shareholders, but we treat our employees like family, and that's really, driven home to me. So I do try, and it's been an influence on my life, and I always try and live that same mantra.
Great. Excellent. Let's now go to Jonathan. Jonathan, can you unmute your line and introduce yourself?
All right. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Jonathan Vermeer. I grew up in the Vermeer Corporation in Iowa. We build heavy equipment and machinery manufacturing company. So I grew up definitely around it. My father worked in the business. My grandpa started it. My aunts and uncles work in the business and have cousins in the business. I chose to go a different direction, at least out of college, and now live in Los Angeles. And I'm a professor and a writer. but I have always been passionate about the business and its legacy and being involved. We have a pretty engaged shareholder group, and I'm currently on the ownership council. So we do governance and family policies, shareholder agreements, kind of everything that FBN and et cetera talks about all the time. And then as I would say, an influencing situation was had many good influences, but I'd say one was probably the Chicago FBN International Conference, where I think kind of really opened my eyes that all the different ways that one can be involved, even if they're not in the day-to-day operation of the business. That as an owner, creating structures for entrepreneurial opportunities for family members, either in or outside of the business, etc. So that was a big influence on me.
That's great. Excellent. Mike, do you want to unmute your line and introduce yourself? Mike?
Mike, if you're having technical difficulties, what you might want to do is on the control panel, select telephone and dial in using your telephone. It could be something with your computer's mic and speakers if you're joining us in that method. So why don't we go to the next person, and we'll circle back to Mike and see if we can't hear him in a minute.
Okay, Nadine?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, hi, I'm Nadine. I live in Vancouver, Canada, and my family business, it's quite diverse, but let's just say I work for Soho Management. Share something about myself. I just finished my MBA 2 weeks ago.
Congratulations.
So, thank you. So now I'm really like part of my MBA. I have to technically do a 4-month work term, and I wanted to come back to the family business. I couldn't go back to the same job I was doing before. So what I'm doing actually is I really want to put in these governance structures within our organization. And I'd say that's also how I've sort of influenced our organization. I went to Kellogg last year and I did the Governing Family Enterprises course there. Mm-hmm. And it really opened up my eyes to how many things like that we have done and yet we haven't done. So those are things that I really want to push into the organization. I think I've already got my family members on board to get this together. Yeah.
That's great. Excellent. All right. Let's go to Antoni. I apologize if is it just Anthony?
Yes, hello. It's Antoni. You're correct. I'm Polish. I'm Antoni Jaspulski. We have a family business back in Europe, and I'm just currently in the US. That's why I decided to join in and see what's going on at the FBN North America. Our business is in food flavorings. It's called JAR Flavor House. In English, that's the international name, as well as the brand name. And I have only been in the business for the last 1.5 years, and before that, I have been a corporate banker for the last 9 years. So this is completely different what I'm doing right now, and it's also very difficult to actually, have my dad as my boss and all of that. However, I was super influenced by him ever since I grew up and was born, because the business was always around, and I'm a 3rd generation myself. So it has kind of been there in the blood already for a while. And I am proud that I was able to influence my father to actually finally go ahead and change the legal structure of the business, and this is what I have been doing for the last 1.5 years, because the laws, the legal perspective is pretty complicated back in Poland, and so it took a while. And then my dad is also at his age already, so that also didn't ease the things up, and yeah. So this is a little bit about me for now.
Excellent.
Thank you.
I'm very glad I could be here, I must say. So thank you very much for letting me join.
Oh, absolutely.
Welcome. Bethany, can you give us a quick introduction?
Yeah, hi everyone, can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, this is Bethany Anderson Walter. I am with Avoya Travel. I am a third generation family member in the business. I work alongside two of my brothers and my father and my uncle. I actually have never worked outside of the family business. So straight after college, I came straight into the family business and started at a low-level position. Have been working my way up over the last 7 years. So that's been an interesting transition. And then I think for the story about someone who influenced me would definitely be my father. He's here on a day-to-day basis still, but he's stepping out more and more as my brothers and I continue to grow and as our company continues to grow. So he's been really good about helping us learn the transition from directing questions to him to making the decisions ourselves.
Great, excellent. Henry Seymour, are you on?
Hello?
Hi, Henry.
Hello? Okay, I wasn't sure if this thing had a mic. Hello, I'm Henry Seymour with Seymour Milling Company, 6th generation family. My family owns and operates a flour mill for making wheat flour for cookies, cakes, and crackers. I've worked with the family in the family business since 2006, my junior year of high school. Started out with bagging. Now I'm more of a hodgepodge assistant who goes to shows and is working on specialty niche market products in our specialty ingredients division.
Great.
Great.
Excellent. Should we? Okay, it seems like we've lost Mike, so we're going to move on to our next slide and start getting into our presentation a little bit. And we're going to, in a little while, we're going to ask you guys to chime in relation to some questions. But the challenge that we face as successors in family businesses is that we're born into a story that's already being told about our parents and our grandparents, often about these kind of mythic feats that our parents have accomplished or our grandparents have accomplished. And to give you an example, I'm going to tell you a little bit, if we go to the next slide, about Lance Crane. Lance Crane is our executive in residence at the Loyola Family Business Center, but Lance Crane's family their history goes back to the late 1700s. Lance's 6th generation, so however many great-grandparents that is, goes back to Stephen Crane in 1770, who was making paper for patriotic newspapers and the colonial currency at the time, and actually sold paper to Paul Revere to pay the Continental Army during the Revolution. So Lance was born into this story about his family that existed for hundreds of years. And the challenge to this is that the stories about the successes of the family can really cast a shadow. It can be positive in that it shares a sense of values and a sense of history, a sense of stability. But as we all know, it can also create a sense of mentality that we've always done things a certain way and we should always do things that way, which can sometimes stifle the next generation in their growth and development. So if we go to the next slide, this mythology can create a shadow for the successors. So the stories can tell us on the good side about our values and our beliefs and our history, but on the bad side, they can form a shadow that says you can only do things a certain way. These stories show a sense of the corporate and family beliefs and the traditions of how we operate as a family. So this leads to what we call the successor's curse. The successor's curse is that your accomplishments as a family, or as an individual, I should say, are always compared to those that went before you. That your successes are always seen in comparison to your parents and your grandparents. Oftentimes your siblings, if any of you have had a sibling who's been very successful ahead of you and you're a later born, These shadows can decrease the sense of accomplishment that you have as a successor, and people can see, or people only think that your successes are related to the fact that you're a part of this successful family. So what we've seen in a lot of successors is this can lead to self-doubt or resistance. There are people in your organization that will always think that you're just there because of your last name. And this is kind of the curse of being a successor. It's not something that magically goes away, but it can get better as you establish your credibility and your ability to influence.
Mm-hmm. And so we have a question for you guys. On the next slide here, we're wondering if you can chime in and answer one or both of these. So the question is, how does the successor's curse show up in your world for you, whether you've seen it, whether it's happened to you directly or your aunt or your father? And then the other question is, how has the successor's curse impacted your life? Oh yeah, here we go. Or the life of your parents or siblings. So we'd love to hear from you, how this has impacted you or your family.
So feel free to unmute if you've got something you want to add.
Well, Andrew, while people are thinking about that, I have sort of a thought and a question for you. Thinking about this successor's curse, it seems like it could be heightened when next gens are put in high-level positions at a young age. You know, it could be sitting on the board or leading a department, especially if they feel like they're in over their head, and that can sort of be seen and read by other people. And so, but when families require next gens to work up the ranks, like Audrey's family, I would think that having that experience then lessens the successor's curse.
Yeah, I mean, wherever you earn your credibility and you create a track record, it helps to balance out the successor's curse. You know, the way I experienced the successor's curse in my family was, so I inherited ownership from my dad when I was 22, and my father passed away. And so what I found was that everybody started treating me or putting me in the position that my dad was in. So they started looking to me to do the same things that my dad did. Now you have to think about the fact that my dad was a lawyer. He was an estate tax planning attorney. So he had a lot of technical skills, but he was also trusted by all the family members. So on the good side, people automatically trusted me. On the bad side, they were expecting me to fill some of those technical skills that I didn't have. I was a psychology and music major, you know, still kind of struggling just coming out of school, but everybody looked to me to do the same thing that my dad did, even though maybe I didn't have the qualifications. So that was kind of how the successor's curse showed up for me.
So maybe we could hear from Audrey. Audrey, it'd be interesting to hear your perspective since you did work outside of the family and then came back into the family. Do you feel like the successor's curse is sort of alive and well in your situation or not? Or maybe we could hear from Jonathan. Jonathan, you mentioned a lot of people work in your family business, and so maybe you have a little insight to share.
Sure. This is Jonathan. A couple thoughts. I did witness it, frankly, with my, so my grandfather was the founder, and my dad in the 80s was had ascended to be president of the company, and was trying to make decisions he thought was best for the company. Even though my grandpa was involved and on the board, and was trying to step away, but clearly the founder of the company has a lot of power and mythology around that, and became a little bit difficult where it can be hard to implement your own ideas and potential change in direction or embracing some new technologies that were coming around that my grandfather had different perspectives on, and that definitely led to friction and eventually my father leaving the company. So that's something I think that successor's curse and kind of trying to live up to the generation before you, but also how you handle that conflict is critical. And in all fairness, I'm sure there are better ways my father could have handled it in the moment, but and if it became where, kind of two, I don't know, firstborn leaders saw differently, and the previous generation, won out. And then I would say that just in general, I think, that can continue, and even if previous generations, are brilliant and in their own right, the rules kind of apply differently to them, especially if they're a founder, but also as companies grow, the company evolves. So like where my grandfather, brilliant engineer, innovator, inventor, and, the whole company is due to him. He had, long periods of time where he would kind of manage from afar and spend time, fishing in the summers and kind of doing a lot of things he enjoyed. But, as the company as a whole grows, future generations, really can't have that flexibility. It's a different type of company. And so it's, it's a reality that it's kind of the younger generations probably have to work harder, be more educated. They have to earn it more than the previous generation.
Yeah, you raise a great point that one of the traps that we get into with the successor's curse is overly emulating what our parents did, which can, number one, make it hard for us to establish our identity as successors, but number two, encourage us to think that the way our parents did it is the only way to be successful, which, in my case, it was, if I had tried to be like my dad, I would have fallen flat on my face because I didn't have the skill sets that he had. So, Audrey or Anthony, do you have anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, sure, I'll add something. So my great-grandfather started the company, and he was kind of regarded as the innovator, and then my grandfather took over, and he was kind of the engineer. Now my father runs the business, and he's kind of the sales guy. So it's interesting to think of what kind of leader, how different people are, and just moving through the next generation. There's no right or wrong, but just how you want to take the company. And we've evolved a lot over the years. We spent the first 100 years as a really straight fire company, and now more than half of our business is defense. So just trying to think differently. And I'm actually the first person to work outside the business for an extended period of time. We implemented the family participation plan after the third generation came in. So it's something new that we're trying out. So I'm the first person to come in from the outside and try to figure out, how much time should I wait before I start proposing ideas, and how do you respectfully challenge some of the certain systems that are in place now. So I guess that's how I experience it now.
Gotcha.
Great.
Anthony, did you have something you wanted to add?
Sure, always. This is a very interesting, conversation. Actually, I also have a question for you, just relating to what you said. But before I go to that, let me answer first. So, I've been to the business only for 1.5 years, and I never actually. I claimed that my father, as I'm like his first son. I have 3 other siblings, but I'm his first son. He always wanted me to be in the business. So ever since I even graduated from high school, he would be like, "So when are you coming to work?" And I just saw how much he worked, and never had really time for the family, because the business was. He was growing the business. Because his father did a different thing, so it was a continuation in a way, but it was a different type of business, and then and that was very difficult, to cope with, because for one, my father's perspective was obviously different due to both age and just the experience, and then he just didn't understand why would I want to waste any of my time anywhere else apart from at the company, and I just couldn't do it because I just disagreed with a lot of things. With a lot of ways that he handled things, and I didn't think that such things should be handled this way. So I actually wanted to go ahead and get an education in management, and I did. Whereas my father is a chemist, and just a born entrepreneur. Moreover, it was just very difficult to actually, go into banking and do corporate banking, which was absolutely beneficial for where I'm at right now, or for any other job that I would end up being and doing. But then, that perspective of my father, and then kind of being laid out all the time that I'm sort of wasting my time outside of the company, whereas there are so many things that need to be done in here that regular employees wouldn't be able to do. And then relating that to number two, my sister, she's also in the business, but then she went and got her a degree in management and marketing to be able to actually join the business and help it out. So she has not worked anywhere else apart from our family business, and she has grown over, like, from the bottom up kind of thing. So that is, I mean, I can see how, I mean, she's doing a great job, my sister, but then I can see how unhappy she is about not having had any kind of experience outside of the company, because like, we are sometimes sitting down and then having a conversation, and we are like from the completely different worlds, because I would be working at global corporations and doing things completely differently than she has been doing, and whatever she was doing, she just learned on her own at the business. So it's just also not making it easy for us right now to be on the board and trying to work things out.
Mm-hmm. Thanks for sharing. So that actually is a great segue into our next topic, which is really kind of one of the antidotes to the successor's curse, which is the question of how do you build credibility. I think one of the traps that successors can run into if they don't have outside work experience is being credible. So to talk about credibility, give you this definition, that is the quality of being trusted and believed in, or the quality of being convincing or believable. So one of the questions we're going to ask you in a little bit is kind of how have you built credibility, et cetera, so you can start thinking about that. But to go a little bit deeper into what do we mean when we talk about credibility, we'll go to the next slide and talk about internal credibility. So there are kind of two types of credibility that I think are important for a successor to develop. The first is a sense of internal credibility. Is how do I become credible to myself? So Antoni, the struggle you talked about with your sister is she's trying to figure out, how do I show up as credible? How do I believe in myself and my own credibility if I haven't had this outside work experience, if I've never been tested kind of outside the family business? And that's related to kind of this psychological concept of the ideal self and the actual self. We have the ideal of who we want to be in the world as a leader, as a professional, etc. And then we have who our behaviors show us to be as a person or an individual. And so ideally, our internal credibility is highest when our behaviors align with who we want to be and our values and our beliefs. So we start to lose internal credibility or belief in ourselves when we have a certain value and we start to act in ways that are counter to those values, or we start to lie, or we do things that undermine our own credibility to ourselves. So it's important to think about, how do I build belief in myself? And there are a lot of different ways, and we'll talk about some of the ways you can do that. But certainly the working your way to the top mentality of I'm going to earn my own credibility is a part of that. Now, if we go to the next slide, the other nuance to credibility is building credibility with others, or external credibility. Is what's the reputation that I want to have, and how do I achieve that reputation? So how do I align my actions with the reputation that I want to have? So I want to be seen as an open and engaging person, so do my behaviors align with that? Or do I isolate, and do I keep my door closed so that people don't feel like they can come in and talk to me? So how do I align my reputation with who I want to be and my own beliefs about myself? And this is where 360s can actually help us understand how other people perceive us. And it's a critical part of our Next Generation Leadership program, to get that 360 and get a sense of how do others perceive me. I have my own self-perception, but what's the reputation I have with other people? One of the people I interviewed in some of the research that I've done was Christy Hefner, and she said that true power is given to you by the people you lead, not by the people who gave you the job. So how do I build my credibility with those people?
And so looking at the next slide, we're going to talk about ways to build credibility. And one way is to define your values and your mission and your goals and work toward them. So this can not only help build your own internal credibility, but if you share your goals with others and they see you accomplishing the things that you set out to accomplish, it helps to build your external credibility as well. And then setting boundaries. So this helps you stay aligned with your values and your goals. And it's funny because I used to say yes to everything. Somebody would ask me to do something. Can you take on a new side project? Or, can you sit down in this meeting for me? And I would say yes to everything and found myself just really unhappy and unappreciative. And then I learned how to say no. And sometimes it takes a lot of courage, but if you explain the why behind it, people generally can understand your position, especially if you're pointing to your values and your goals. We can build credibility by being open to new things. It sends the message that, we aren't a know-it-all and we value knowledge and education. I mean, I think that I heard everybody on the call has at least a 4-year degree. So having a degree, an MBA, a PhD certainly builds your credibility and makes you an expert in some area. So the next one here, personal accountability. This is a big one. This is one that's, that I kind of get excited about because it's being true to yourself, acting with integrity with your values and your goals. And then the other thing that comes to mind is just basic follow-through on commitments. If you commit to something, then people expect you to deliver. And those with a high level of accountability, they even circle back to those that they committed to and say something like, you know what, I'm not able to meet that deadline, but tomorrow I'll have it I'll have it on your desk first thing in the morning. And it's really about, being proactive and holding yourself in a high regard. So being authentic, having empathy for others and taking risks. Well, now taking risks is really about challenging yourself and getting outside of your comfort zone. And it's difficult because of the uncertainty and the unknowing, unknowing whether you're going to come out on top or not, but it builds character and internal credibility, and you learn to trust yourself and gain more confidence. So those are some ways to build credibility. Why don't we now turn to the next slide and open it up to the group? Are there some other ways that you have built credibility in your family business? What worked? What worked well, what didn't work? Maybe, maybe there was a failure or something that you didn't do as well as you could have. But that also builds credibility, especially, it depends on how you react to that failure. So I'm going to open it up and see if anybody wants to share some ways that they've built credibility.
Hi, Nadine here. I didn't really mention too much about what I do, but I'm G2, and I've been working with my family business since 2008 when I finished university, and I was working through my MBA as well. And I felt like originally when I left my my undergrad, I felt that I would never be good enough. I'd never be able to fill the shoes. I'd never have that credibility. And I learned as the years went on by putting in the hours. You're doing that internally and externally. You're showing other people when you arrive at the office early or on time and set that precedence that I'm not going to be late. I'm not going to be just the entitled person coming in and putting in the hours. I think that really helped me, personally, as well as it helped other people see that I was dedicated. And actually, I think the biggest thing that helped me was the mentoring, working with my father directly. I learned so much. Just even doing the little grungy tasks or, you know, doing the banking side of things, it really taught me so much, and I feel that that really brought up my confidence, and it made me more credible personally as well as externally, because I could talk the lingo, I could walk the walk a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
I think that really helped me personally.
Mm-hmm. That's great. How about others? Others have stories of how they've built their credibility?
This is Audrey. This is something we actually decided to do recently, is add an agenda item at the board of directors meeting to have a report from the fourth generation. So you know, our first one was just kind of outlining the structure of our G4 group and how frequently we meet and some of the projects we're working on and what we want to accomplish. But going forward, we plan to have some almost like case study and proposal type structures with our presentations. And I think that if you can gain some credibility from someone like the board of directors too, which isn't a family and it's not an employee, I think that can also help down the road.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks.
Yeah, having institutional support for the next generation is often really important. But that accountability is so key. If we don't have a system that holds the next generation accountable, it's hard for that next generation to overcome that successor's curse and move forward. So I'm going to move on to the next slide, which is really talking about influence. So there's a relationship between influence and credibility. You know, in order to influence other people, which we talk about as the capacity to have an effect on the character development or behavior of someone or something, you need credibility, but credibility is not enough. You also need the interpersonal behaviors to allow you to influence somebody. So one of the things we know through research that increases your influence on other people is how connected they feel to you. You know, you certainly need to be seen as credible in terms of qualifications and experience and values, etc. But you also need to develop a relationship with those people that you're trying to influence, that they can trust you, that you care about them, and that you have to exhibit some of the interpersonal skills that allow them to feel connected to you in a way that they're willing to be influenced by you. You can try to influence in a lot of different ways, and Jennifer's going to talk a little bit about that.
Sure. On the next slide, we're talking about the when of influencing. And so I know that this is pretty basic, but you know, I just wanted to set a little bit of a foundation for the next part, in that, you know, there are times when influencing is really important for our voices to be heard. And so especially when decisions or changes are happening that impact our life. I think one of the worst things that can happen is something happening to your life, you know, and a decision being made, and you didn't have a voice or you didn't have a say. And so so that is a good time to speak up. And then certainly when somebody asks your opinion or asks for your feedback or your advice, you're influencing them. And, you know, influencing really goes back and forth two ways when you're having that type of a conversation. And then when you're pitching a new idea or selling an idea, you certainly have influence over the outcome and the decisions that are being made there. So on the next slide, we're talking about styles of influence. I did a little homework and found an article on the styles of influencing, and it's an article that is in our resources slide towards the back, and so it's a Harvard Business Review article. Sorry, it identifies 5 styles of influencing, and they're listed here on the screen. So rationalizing is using logic, facts, reasoning to present your ideas, using, you know, your experience, your expertise to persuade others. Asserting is relying on your personal confidence, rules, procedures, standard operating procedures, laws, authority to influence others. Negotiating is more about looking for compromises and making concessions in order to reach an outcome that satisfies what you're trying to accomplish. Then we have negotiating, inspiring, which Andrew, I think you do this really well, inspiring others by communicating a sense of excitement and possibility. And then we have bridging, which is more about finding the middle ground, influencing others, and uniting or connecting them together. So more of buy-in, I would say. And so thinking about these 5 styles, I would say the one I see most often is probably rationalizing and asserting. Mm-hmm. What about you, Andrew? Which one do you use?
I think men often use rationalizing. I think there's some gender influences in this. Men tend to be towards rationalizing and asserting, and I think that the research shows that women tend to engage more in the relationship and be more involved in kind of negotiating, bridging, and inspiring. So,
thanks for your comments.
Mm-hmm.
On the next slide, we are going to do a poll and see which style do you guys use most often. So on your screen should be some radio buttons there, so you can go ahead and make your selection, which one you use most often. I think I'm more rationalizing and asserting. It's interesting based on what you just said about the data.
Mm-hmm. I aspire to be rationalizing, but I think I tend to be more negotiating and inspiring. So make your selection, and we'll see where people in the group find themselves.
I wonder if it's going to correlate with how many men and women we have on the call.
Interesting. So, rationalizing, negotiating, and inspiring.
I was going to say, it's exactly like half rationalizing and negotiating. That's what I do.
Yeah. So it's interesting that nobody said asserting. You know, I think sometimes that's a question we face as next generation members. Is when do we assert ourselves, and when do we push? Mm-hmm. And I think one of the things we've learned in the research that I've done over the last 20 years is that the next generation often has to take that responsibility of pushing and trying to change things, because the older generation doesn't necessarily have the motivation or need to change. So the next generation has to start to rub up against their parents and start to try to change things in a respectful way in order to build their own credibility, to start to determine what they think is right. You know, that challenge of the trap of emulating our parents is what our parents did that made them successful may not be what makes us successful moving forward. As I think Jonathan was mentioning earlier, you know, the company that we're stepping into is very different than the company that our parents stepped into. Mm-hmm. So the things that need to be done to make it successful moving forward may be very different than what our parents did. So I think Audrey also talked about that with the CRM system. Some great examples. So Ryan, you want to take us to the next slide?
We have another question for you guys, a couple questions. What are some challenges that you face when being credible and influencing others? You know, if you have some challenges that you're willing to share with us, perhaps, you know, you could get some advice and a little bit of coaching on the call here from your peers. The other question is back to those influencing styles. You know, when have you used them effectively or seen somebody else use them?
Deep thought. Deep
thought. I can start with the first one. This is Anthony. Well, actually, I would say my challenge right now is still, although I'm there for 1.5 years at the family business, you know, of just not being credible to the employees. And I think what makes it like further difficult is just not, you know, my sister not really kind of helping it to facilitate and actually get there. So whenever like I would be doing something and you know, make some decisions, you know, I see people would go behind my back to her or even my dad, but mostly to my sister, and just yeah, and just kind of deal with it the way they want to deal with it, whatever the outcome. But I mean, it's just a fact, and it's very frustrating, to be honest. It's very frustrating, and I think. Well, I know for sure that my mentality, like entering from a completely different world to the business, is different, for sure. But then it's, I think, not received openly in general. I think by most, but rather being questioned. Especially with things like that, going back, behind my back, and actually getting a different answer or a different way to give a solution or whatever that is.
Mm-hmm.
So
you raise a great point that
Mm-hmm.
there are a lot of alliances between the non-family employees and our parents in this situation. So oftentimes when we aren't seen as credible or haven't earned our credibility, or that successor's curse is kicking in, those non-family employees may try to work around us, and our parents kind of be conspirators to that credibility. So if the parents then align with the non-family employees when they go around you, it actually undermines your credibility.
Exactly.
And so that's an important conversation to have with parents about this. And like I like to say, don't involve your parents in your problems unless they're going to sink the ship, because when you involve your parents in excessively in helping to solve your problems, you're actually undermining your credibility in many ways.
Yeah.
So, do others have thoughts to that?
All right. Does anybody else want to chime in and answer one or both of those questions?
Hi, this is Jonathan. I guess sounds like most of the others, excuse me, on this call are working in the business. So I definitely think I, face another unique challenge in that sense that, I want to be involved in the business and in ways that I can, and whether it's on the ownership council or potentially in the future maybe as a board member, finding that building that credibility and influence without having that same field of experience. I mean, I guess it's finding ways to do that either through education, but also just kind of progressive continue learning about the company and being involved in committees. And I think it's just something like one of the other people said, putting in the time and the work, and even if that's not necessarily working in the business, the more you're involved and people see that you have consistent, I think, contribution leadership, that's a way to build it. But it's has its challenges.
Exactly. One of the things I thought of when I was listening to you is another way for you to build credibility is to present or speak in your industry or in the family business industry. I know that there are some opportunities with FBN, some speaking spots that may be available, but that's another way, for you to add to your credibility.
Well, okay. And I think you raise a great question, or a great point, that the challenge of building credibility as a shareholder and somebody who's not working in the business can sometimes be a little bit more daunting, because people don't see you on a regular basis. Maybe the track record you're building outside isn't as transparent to people inside the business as somebody who's working in the business, where everybody can see their track record that they're building across time. So thinking intentionally about that.
Right. Something a quick mention was that I find, while I think there are some unique ways I can contribute, frankly, by being outside the business, looking through a different lens, it's really how to maximize that influence and convincing those on the inside that assume that you don't have much to contribute because of that. But trying to find a way to make that into an asset instead of liability.
Exactly.
Bethany, Brian, Nadine, any additional thoughts to throw in here?
I think for me, one of the challenges that I face is that no matter, sometimes when I do something, it's going to be like, well, your father wouldn't do it that way.
Yeah.
That's
every successor's favorite comment, right?
Yeah, I know, right? So that is, I would say that's a challenge, especially when I'm working with people that my father's worked with for so many years, and when we're trying to influence, you know, something new or a new system or, you know, something like the Salesforce. The kind of challenges we face by that, it's also kind of difficult to say, no, this is the way it should be done, when rather than fighting on what would your father do.
That's a great point. So Ryan, if you can go to the next slide, I want to talk a little bit about some keys to managing the relationship portion of influencing others that I think might be helpful. You know, number one is headlining, making sure that you're clear about your idea and that you're expressing your idea in a way that people can understand it. I think sometimes we think that people understand exactly what we're talking about because it's in our head, but we have to make sure that we're creating that headline, that concise statement of what is our point and why are we trying to make this change, introduce this idea. We need to also understand what's important to the person we're talking to. So, you know, if you're talking about that non-family manager that's been with your dad for years and years and years, you might, listening to them very carefully and being able to demonstrate that you understand their concerns and their interests gives you a lot more influence. You know, so one of their fears might be that once you take over for your parents, that they're going to be gone. You know, that their alliance is with your parents, not with you. And so the more you can build an alliance with them and they can learn that you're credible, that consistency and accountability, then it starts to reduce their anxiety. But that comes through listening to them and understanding what's important to them, and then trying to understand how your goals align with theirs, if they do. You know, they're not always going to align with them, but I have a colleague who likes to say that behavior doesn't change unless it's proven to be counterproductive to that person's goals. So if that person's goal is to grow and get promotions or etc., you know, if you know that that's one of the motivators for them, then you can try to align with how getting on board with this change will help further their career, further their interests, you know. So aligning goals, and then, you know, it's as simple as eye contact sometimes. The basic piece of connection between humans, whether it's your family connection or your connection with non-family employees, starts with eye contact. So you can tell when conflict is extremely high in a family when nobody's making eye contact with each other, because it's the first point of connection between people. So if we go on to the next slide, just starting to wrap up, to be persuasive, we must be believable. To be believable, we must be credible. And to be credible, we must be truthful. So again, you know, we have to be truthful to ourselves about who we are, what our strengths are, what our interests are, and be truthful with others about where we want to go and what we want to do. Sometimes that successor's curse and that successor's shadow changes how we see ourselves, and we want to move to that truthful view of ourselves and our own credibility and our own influence. So finally, just to wrap up, we wanted to give you a few resources that we think could be helpful. If you go to the next slide, Ryan. These are some books and resources that could be helpful to you in thinking about these issues, and if you'd like a copy of these slides, we'll send them to you so that you can pull down these resources and get a hold of them. Once again, you know, this has been a great conversation. Thank you all for your participation and sharing. We'd love for you guys to join us in Miami Coral Gables November 12th, 13th, and 14th. November 12th and 13th is a full family program, and then the Next Generation Only Day starts Friday evening and goes all day on the 14th. We have a couple of really nice parties that are being hosted by Tonti Properties and Brown Foreman for the Next Gen. So we encourage you guys to register for that and to continue this conversation with your peers face-to-face in Miami. You can get more details on that conference by going to our website at www.fbn-na.org.
And this is Jennifer. I will follow up and send a copy of the slides and also some information about Miami and an evaluation. So we would hope that you complete the evaluation so that we can improve programming for the next time around. So thank you so much for joining us. I hope that you found value out of sharing and hearing our stories, and hope you have a great day.
Thank you guys so much. I have a quick question, if you don't, about Miami. I think I might be the only family member who would be able to attend.
Okay.
Are there a lot of single, like non-family, like individuals coming to the seminars, or is it mostly groups of families?
We have both. We have both. There are some people that we call the family champions. They're the ones that rally people around ideas and moving stuff forward. So we have people who attend as individuals, and we have some families that bring full groups. So I think Audrey attended as an individual in last year's Miami conference. Audrey, you still there?
Yep, I'm here. I did. I went by myself last year, and it was still very enjoyable.
Okay.
Great.
Good.
Great.
Okay. Take care, guys. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Have a good day.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.